Thank you. Yeah, and Sophie just said right before you all came in, she said, now we have to switch to professional mode. But that's not really the case. We're going to do a presentation today that's going to be very fast-paced. We're going to go through a little introduction to kind of what Web3 is, what NFTs are, and then we're going to do a very fast-paced review of a bunch of projects. And I hope that it will give you some ideas about what's happening right now and also what's possible in what I truly consider a next generation of the internet. Maybe you'll agree by the end of this. Some of you probably have a lot of experience, maybe significantly more experience than I do working with these technologies. You're welcome to share, interrupt, add in. Those of you who are new to this, these things raise a lot of questions. You're also welcome to interrupt, ask questions as we go. I've tried to make it relevant to kind of both extremes, but let's see. I'm going to share my presentation. And just like from the outset here, the rebirth of the web, that's pretty bold, but good morning, everyone. That's how we start in the Web3 world. When you jump into a Discord or Twitter community and you work with NFTs or anything Web3, everybody says good morning to each other, and that already is a big difference. Where I'm coming from, my day job, you could say, is Feats. And the reason why I'm so interested in this space is because Feats is a next generation platform. It's a professional network, kind of like a cross between Instagram and LinkedIn. And it's about uniting people behind the projects they do together. And that's why I'm so interested in revealing kind of what's happening in projects like I'm going to share with you today, because I think you can learn a lot and you can also meet people. And so that's what Feats is today. It helps people collect their work and showcase the projects they've done, but as a shared thing, not as an individual portfolio, but as shared portfolio. It also enables you to follow companies and interests like UX or videography or whatever it is. And there's a lot more categories coming. And then it helps you meet people who you want to work with. So it kind of cuts out the middleman in the recruitment process. So you can actually see the work people have done. You can get in touch with them. If you want to hire somebody, you can trust what they've done because everything in Feats is verified. So check it out. That's what I do in my day job, and the world of Web3 and NFTs we're going to talk about today is slowly merging with that, but it's really coming from a hobby interest, you could say. And that's because we are so early, and everyone has seen these curves before, and the hype cycle, and all the analysts have different ways of describing it, but really in any wave of adoption, there are the people who are early. And the people who are early are, frankly, all of us right now, because you're getting introduced to it today. And the wave of adoption that we're seeing here is not unlike in the mid-90s with the rise of the internet itself, then the rise of the platforms, you could say Web 2 with very centralized Facebook and LinkedIn and other large platforms. Then you could say the mobile internet maybe added a little edge to that, but didn't change that much. Well, this is a fundamental shift that's happening right now, and we are so early. And that's what I'd encourage you to do, is what we say in this world is do your own research on many levels. Find what's interesting to you, but also there are a lot of investment aspects to this. There's money flowing throughout the network because it's a new way of structuring relationships, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But this is not investment advice. I'm going to show you a bunch of projects today that may or may not be something that you'd want to take seriously. Scams are also very common. So people who work in this space are just used to not clicking on anything, not trusting anything, not doing anything too quickly, double checking everything. And I mean that. Every URL, every bit of advice you ever get from anyone in messaging or anything else has to be checked independently. Luckily, there's a lot of transparency and other ways of doing that. Decentralized technologies are what we're going to talk about today. They're kind of behind the scene. I won't make it very technical, but there are some aspects you need to know about. Individual ownership is the idea that we are building a new way of thinking about networks based on the individual first. So creators and contributors are actually the owners of everything that's created in this next generation. And that's a very big mental shift, but it comes quite naturally once you get into it, and I'll show you that today. Extreme transparency is the idea that everything that happens, all history, is permanent and easy to access. So you can see people's track records, you can see what's going on inside of different apps, but there are no human identities. So people work with anonymous identities and still build trust and reputation. So we're going to see a bit of that. And then the last one is the way people collaborate across many projects at once, with smaller roles, larger roles. They help each other in a way that I haven't seen in networks before. It's much more personal, and that's because of just the way that these communities are developing. So I'll try and give you a hint of that as well. And as we get into this, please, you're welcome to just raise your hand, and Anne-Sophie or someone else will bring you in to talk. Be happy to get into some of these things, but we do have a lot to cover. So I'm just going to keep up the pace until somebody interrupts. What I thought I'd do is start by framing the space with something we all know. Let's say billions of people understand that there's this iOS and Android. People in the IT industry have a little more sophisticated breadth. So you know about other operating systems and maybe have cared about some of them deeply over the years. What we're looking at here is something very similar, is the emergence of new operating systems. And yeah, we call them blockchains, but they really are like global computers that are running distinct operating systems. And that's the best mental model I've found. And then you can start, seeing them expand and see their differences if you get to know a few of them. So what I've chosen was to highlight here the 5 that I think have the most traction and are most interesting from this perspective. There are many, many others. Some of them have billions of dollars flowing through them, extremely large NFT projects on them, but I just chose to keep it simple. On top of these blockchains are smart contracts, and so smart contracts are it's code that's deployed onto a blockchain and then runs permanently. And they have different levels of capability depending on the generation of the technology being used and the blockchains themselves. But think of it as kind of very, very simplistic applications that have very permanent roles in blockchains. On top of that are the tokens and NFTs. We'll talk about those a little bit more in a minute. As you can see, Bitcoin doesn't have a smart contract model yet. It's coming gradually, but it has the token, Bitcoin. Others like Ethereum can have many tokens on top of Ethereum in addition to Ethereum token itself. And then the way that you interact with tokens and NFTs are through decentralized apps. And tokens can also be traded on exchanges, as you may know, typical like currencies, but decentralized apps are very different. The way you interact with each other and with assets in Web3, we'll be looking at that a little bit. And it all comes down to the wallet, that the wallet is in fact your identity, it's your login. You bring your assets into a decentralized app, and then you use them there, and you can also take them out with one click. So it's a very different model than we know from the platforms that kind of own and hold everything and then create barriers to leaving. And those things are also expanding and very different in some of the different ecosystems. All of the ones that are here, besides Bitcoin, the other 4 have very similar setups where once you get to know Ethereum, you can actually use Solana, Cardano, Tezos, and others in a very similar way. Underneath all of this are some protocols, exchanges, bridges, things that allow you to move assets across or within, let's say, Ethereum. There are actually different levels. There's the main net, which is called L1, level 1. And then there are these level 2 networks on top of it, and you can move between them. And so there's a lot of complexity behind the scenes, but you don't really have to worry about that. What we're going to do is just focus on this stack on Ethereum and what's being built on it, excluding a lot of important projects, but there's just too much. So we're going to focus on that. And then we're going to touch on the organizing principle of the DAO, the decentralized autonomous organization that many of these projects are now being run with. And what that is instead of forming a company or instead of some kind of formalized investor board and all of that, what they do is they create a software-based organization that handles the flow of funds, that handles all kinds of democratic processes that shape the projects I'm going to show you. Not all of them are run on DAOs, but many are. So that's what we're going to look at. And before we get into that, I just want to highlight the difference between tokens and NFTs. Tokens really being fungible, meaning they act like currencies. So Ethereum is the one that we're really focused on, but to give you a sense of scale, in terms of market cap is an interesting way to look at it. Bitcoin is significantly larger, and these numbers it's very volatile. So I think Bitcoin was $100 billion more valuable 2 weeks ago, but it goes up and down. Still significantly larger than Ethereum, and then Ethereum is significantly larger than Solana, and the others kind of stack up behind it. Then that's really acting like a currency, meaning you can convert as many Ethereum as you want into dollars or kroner, and it's just based on exchange rates. On the other hand, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are like property, and that means that each one is unique. And there are some types of NFTs where you have additions where they're identical but at a fixed amount, but for the most part, they really are like distinct pieces of property. And I highlighted some projects here that are some of the most successful projects in the sense that either they were historically significant and therefore accrued value, or they were breakthroughs in some other way. And we have Cryptopunks, Fidenza, which is a generative art project, and then a photography project. We're going to look at a lot of those projects today, and to give you a sense of that scale, while maybe Ethereum is around, I think it's around $4,200 today. Fidenzas are selling for an average of $144,000. So just to give you a sense that property values can be much higher than currency values. And the way to think about that maybe more specifically is that you can have a dollar bill and anyone will exchange that for another dollar bill. But as soon as Andy Warhol signs that dollar bill, it's no longer the same as the other ones. And that's pretty much what NFTs are like, is that they have some unique aspect that is provably unique and therefore turns it into a different kind of asset. They're also taxed differently in different countries. There's a lot that goes with that. And the other thing that to think about in terms of the timing or where we are in development is that the movement of money into wallets has been accelerating, and it really started when Ethereum got going in 2016. I remember in 2017 downloading the first Ethereum wallet and trying to catch up, thinking I was behind at that time. Since then, the number of wallets with 1 ETH or more, so again, that's around $4,200 today, around 25,000 kroner. That number of wallets kind of indicates degree of seriousness. So if somebody has that amount of money, they're probably doing something that matters in the space. And so it's an interesting metric. And this is just going through July, and there was 1.2 million of these wallets. And so maybe there's 2 million today. We're very, very early. And what I wanted to do was with this, not just give you some inspiration today, but for those of you who are new to it, to try and give you the simple steps to become one of these people. So you can become one of the first 2 or 3 million in this space. So that's what we're going to do now, unless anybody has any questions or comments before we go. No, let's keep going. So the first step in getting into this is actually setting up a wallet. You can explore all you want, but the funny thing about dApps is that they really are pretty closed and useless unless you have a wallet to interact with them through. So MetaMask is by far the most common. It's from the same people who make Firefox, the Mozilla Foundation. It's an open source, very well established group and widely trusted. It can have its issues, but it generally has proven itself. And that's a Chrome extension that you install. I'll talk about that a little more in a minute, but then there are other kinds of wallets. I just wanted to highlight the two largest hardware wallets. And what those are is they keep your identity, your login, you could say, your what's called private keys in this world, they keep them off of your computer. And then you have to plug in a device to your computer in order to interact with a dApp or a decentralized app or make a purchase. And they're very, very important, but as a beginner, they're not so important. So I recommend starting with MetaMask, and then as you get more serious, then you could add a hardware wallet to what you're doing. So installing MetaMask is just like installing any other Chrome extension. You go to the website, it's very simple, install, add it in there, and then it shows up here as a little icon, and when you click it, you have your wallet with you. And you get comfortable with that as essentially being your login to all applications in this world. You can also go into it and see it more like a bank or an exchange where you hold money. You can see there's also a swap, meaning that from within MetaMask, you can in fact swap between what you see here is ETH, but also you see WBTC, which is wrapped Bitcoin, meaning that you can convert into different tokens. And there are reasons why you would do that, not the least being that many projects today have their own token. They have their own currency. And so you might need to do that within MetaMask. So that's the wallet. That's a very quick story, but that's what you need to know. But getting money into the wallet is the next step. And you need an exchange account of some kind. Coinify is a Danish company, recently acquired, but a Danish origin company, and very good at anti-money laundering and tax reporting and all the things you want in an exchange. And being based in Denmark, it's definitely the one I'd recommend to use. There are others that people use successfully, like CEX and Kraken are probably the two most common. But definitely MyCoinify makes it simple. You literally go to the site, you buy crypto, and the crypto goes into your account, and then you can move it into MetaMask. So very straightforward, but you need to get money into MyCoinify. And the way you do that is either by bank transfer, which takes about a week, or a credit card. And some people set up a card just for this purpose. And usually a bank issued card, like a Nordea or a Danske Bank card, will be the best because they're the most able to enable you to make transfers. Often other banks will restrict, or cards will restrict access to crypto because crypto is their enemy and is highly risky for them because of the money laundering and other things that have historically been an issue. And then you buy some ETH. So you move your kroner into MyCoinify, you buy some ETH. I recommend buying 1 ETH if you can afford it and assume that you can maybe lose it. It's kind of like any high risk activity that uses money. Don't put more money in than you can afford to lose because there are, as I said, a lot of scams, a lot of risk. And there's also bad investment decisions. There are also very good investment decisions. So you want to have a learning curve, get into it, and then maybe put in more if you think it's interesting. Then what you have to do is move the money from MyCoinify, the ETH from MyCoinify to MetaMask, and it's either called a withdrawal or sending. And you actually take the address of MetaMask, your receiving address, and you put it into MyCoinify, and it sends the money using the blockchain into your MetaMask wallet. And it's quite a freaky experience the first time you do it. But then you realize why Web3 is so interesting from a financial services perspective. Money moves in minutes, and it costs nothing. Or small fees to transfer money. Fees meaning the blockchain transfer prices, not some third party. Then you have the marketplaces, and OpenSea is by far the biggest for NFTs, but there are others. There's Super Rare. We're going to look at that a little bit today. We're going to see something in Foundation as well. And there's a ton of them. I would avoid most of the newer ones. They take a little while to get going, and there are so many scams on them, you wouldn't believe it. So be very careful if you venture beyond these. But there are some interesting projects out there. And as I said before, on other blockchains, there are lots of other marketplaces and other things going on. But within Ethereum, these are the three big ones. And then I also recommend that maybe not right away, but shortly after you get going, set up a tax tracker, because it can automatically monitor your exchange account and your wallet and calculate any profit and loss, and make sure that you have an easy, one-click reporting at the end of the year. The Coinly works well, but there are others. But just to say, don't forget that, because every country is different, but everyone needs their tax. So beware. And that leads to the exploration of projects. And we're going to start by just getting into the marketplace idea. And it's not the only thing we're going to look at, the kind of trading side of this. We'll see a lot of other types of projects, but we're going to start here. This is usually the entry point. And it's usually that you come into a marketplace and then it asks you to sign in order to use it. And you'll see a little profile here, just like you would know from Web 2. But instead of creating a login with an email or something, they don't want any personally identifiable information. They don't want any kind of email or anything. They just want you to connect with a wallet. And that's where you start realizing how different this world is. When you click MetaMask, it'll ask you to sign in. You click a sign, and then you're in, and it creates an identity that you'll be using while you're in this exchange. And when you buy things or you do things here or in other places, it will actually read in from your wallet what assets you have or what projects you're part of in order to give you a personalized experience and make your account for you. So it's quite a unique thing to have this wallet kind of representing you. This is kind of a funny project that I chose to just highlight, because a lot of people get into this based on some project they hear about, like, oh, Crypto Mories. These are relatively new. They have an accessible price, in the sense, if you want to think of it that way, it's still close to $10,000 or kroner, but it's on the low end of price for kind of collectibles. They're unique. They mean, memento mori means remember you die in Latin. It has a good story behind it, and you're like, okay, so that's interesting. This is what people talk about when they talk about the kind of collectibles market in NFTs. And there are lots of them. These are the cryptodes. Gremplin is a pretty famous NFT artist. He's done some other really interesting things like nouns. We'll see that project in a minute. And the cryptodes are interesting because they're kind of a play on all the different rarity traits that you find across all different NFT projects. And they became kind of darlings of the collector community. And you can see here that the project is public domain, free to use toads in any way you want. So there are lots of spin-off projects, and it's an interesting community of its own. And that brings us to kind of how to think about this, that you have fine art, you have profile photos, and then you have very kind of graphical projects, and then projects that have more like decentralized finance backbones and DAOs and other things going on. And so what I've decided to do is to start with that distinction that these two I just showed you are really on the profile photo side of things, meaning people actually use them as their profile photo on Twitter or Discord, or in general, think of them as a possible representation of themselves. And there are lots of those. And that quadrant is the one that got started early, and there's a ton of established projects. Those are the Cool Cats, the Bored Apes, the Doodles, and the Cryptopunks. And this is a good time to get used to those ridiculous names. And these representations of profile images start to carry a lot more meaning once you get into this space. So as weird as those look to you right now, I guarantee you they will start to seem less strange as we go through the morning. One reason is that you'll start to realize that people actually adopt these as their identities. So here's just a Twitter space that shows you very quickly what I'm talking about. Out of all of these, really only one has a photo, or two have photos, and maybe these are representations of themselves, I don't know, but you see this is a kaiju, this is a anonymous, this is a noun, this is a punk. And actually people build up more reputation and followers behind these names than you would ever believe, and these identities. And the reason is that they really do hold some value and reputation in the space. And then, of course, you build up a follower like on any other, in any other world. But in this world, you have a choice of identity. The nouns, which you see there as some of the people choosing, are the first project we're going to look at. Just to highlight something special about this is that even though you see it as a little graphic, this is called a noun. What's going on behind it is far more complex. What it is that every day a new one of those little nouns is created by an algorithm that then automatically auctions it. And so the countdown starts every day, and at some point somebody's going to win that auction. And if you can, just put yourself in the mindset of ETH for a moment, that 55,000 or 55 ETH is over $200,000. So somebody just paid over $200,000 to own this little thing right here. Why? Well, the reason is that every day that happens, and it creates this community of collectors who are also part of what they call Nouns DAO. So then the next day, a new one start. And if you want to read more about it, it's pretty fascinating. But what happens is that these people become part of this and become co-owners in the democratic process that spends the money from all of those auctions. And what's interesting about that is not only how they're developing technologies and all kinds of community projects, they're actually able to influence a lot of other projects. And so the people behind the Nouns DAO actually have a very, very big role in the community, and it's growing. And their war chest, they started only 3 months ago. And because they do the auction every day, and it's such a high value collectible, they've raised over $60 million, and it just keeps going. And so this is to give you a sense for the kind of ridiculousness of a noun as a thing, as a collectible. I mean, what is this, right? But its power to unite people and attract funds that can then be deployed. And what you'll find also is that the 10 people behind the originators of this project are actually having their fingers in and being active in some of the most revolutionary things going on. They have the freedom to do it, they have the money to do it, and it's pretty impressive. So take a look at that one at some point. I'm going to keep going because we have so much to cover. And I just wanted to highlight a few other people who are, kind of representing themselves. This is Richard. Richard became even more well-known than he was because he turned down a $10 million offer for his punk, his profile photo. And the reason was his reputation and his role in the community is so important to him as this anonymous identity. And he really does play a great role. He's the kind of guy who says good morning, as I did, every time he gets online. He's the kind of guy that champions the community. And maybe he's a woman, we don't know. Punk6529 is also somebody who's championing the community and pulling people together, shares some of the absolute best long threads on security and how to protect yourself, how to protect your NFTs and currencies. Really a great contributor to the community. And again, nobody knows who this person is. And then AB is a member of a bunch of communities that we're going to look at today, a very hands-on developer and creator, and also super inspiring. So just to say that, these are very strange identities to look at, but the substance is in their work. Once you see the projects they create, what their contributions are, and the respect they get from their communities, it's truly incredible. So this is AB's vault, and what a lot of people do is they'll do some kind of trading more fluidly, and then they'll have a vault. And the vault is always on one of those hardware wallets I mentioned earlier, and very carefully protected. And the assets that they collect over time can be extremely valuable, but not just monetarily, really personally. And so that's what you see in AB's vault. All these things look kind of strange to you, but all of them, if you're in the community, you realize what they are, including the filaments, which AB created, and a number of other things going on here. So they all hold more than monetary value to people. We're going to look at some of these projects. I mentioned the toads earlier, but we're going to look at loot here. We're going to look at fidenzas, a few other things. But what I thought we'd start with is a deep dive into Cryptopunks, because they set it all in motion back in 2017. And the way they started was they're two people based in New York, and they had this idea that you could create something that would be kind of a form of digital ownership if you could see the thing as well as kind of have it in code. And so what they did was they figured out a way to algorithmically generate 10,000 punks. And these punks have different traits that are quite endearing and quite kind of special. And the variety across the 10,000 is extreme, and some are very, very, very rare. Some are more common, but they all have character. And that was the first time anyone had ever done this before. And they also launched it in a very unique way, which is that they gave them away. So it was a free claim. You just had to have an Ethereum wallet. And if you had that Ethereum wallet, you could go to their website and you could claim one, you could trade them. And the secondary market started right away, and they were selling for, $100, $300. And it was a novelty that was eye-opening, because at that time, no one had ever done anything like this. Today, it's a cultural phenomenon in the US and many other countries. You can see them painted on streets. They're kind of a strange, point in history, you could say. They've also become extremely valuable. So these 10,000, here's a group of 9 selling for $9 million. Visa just bought one a couple months ago as a new asset class. They've decided to invest in NFTs, and their first purchase was a $150,000 punk. And the way they talked about it as an asset class definitely set that in motion. And then, as you can see, the $1 million sales have become so common that it doesn't make the news anymore, but it is still very strange. And it's not to say that this whole world is about money, but somehow there is this recognition that if you do something unique, money flows to it, because that's how people show support. That's how people become contributors. They become an owner, or they develop something that can be sold to others, and then they create more value for those people who are holding them. So by holding one of these punks, for example, you often get invited into other projects, and it can create ongoing value. The other thing I mentioned earlier, this extreme transparency, you can see it here, but it's true of every single NFT. An NFT is not just the graphic you see. It's not just the JPEG. It's actually a lot of data. It's unique identifiers, it's transaction history. It can include all kinds of depth. One of the things, the transaction history is pretty mind-blowing, that from the very beginning, the free claim I mentioned, every single interaction, whether it's offered or bid or sold, is public. And everything that happens in your wallet, in fact, is public. Your balance is public. The assets you hold are public, which takes a little getting used to. And it's also why people have multiple wallets, because they definitely get tracked. People who do a lot of trading and who are very successful end up being followed by others, and it can make it more difficult for them to find, to discover new things and so on. But the transparency is a benefit, because I mentioned taxation earlier. This will be the best taxed or most honestly taxed space in the future. In fact, Chainalysis, also I believe run by a Dane, helps governments track this in a fair way. Making sure that value is calculated fairly, and as I mentioned, Coinly and others use this data to help people be able to quantify the value as well. Then just comment on the kind of technology evolution. I do compare NFTs to web pages. At the beginning, I remember the first websites, maybe some of you do, they were super, super simple. And it was amazing that you could even put a GIF on there, or a animated GIF all of a sudden. And that was because the standard evolved. And today we kind of, assume a certain level of capability that really is mind-blowing if you look at where we started. And the same thing is true with NFTs, that when NFTs started, the ERC20 was the token format on the Ethereum network, and it enabled currencies. And what the Punks team, Larva Labs, did was they hacked that in order to make it able to hold enough information to show a graphic. And that really opened up people's minds, and that stimulated the creation of ERC 721, which is the standard that many NFTs use now. And then there are other evolutions of that enable other things, not necessarily replacing previous standards, but adding to them. And there's more coming. But just to give you a sense where we are in development, it's early, but it's moving pretty fast also compared to HTML. And it's actually a much more robust ecosystem that there are many more protocols than just HTML in the web, traditional web, and certainly in this space, a lot more protocols matter as well. The other thing I'd say is storage. That you see the graphic, you see that kind of image. It can be video, it can be audio, it can be a combination of those things, and those things can be stored in different ways depending on what they are. Some, but very rarely, are still on like a centralized storage of some kind. Most are either on IPFS or Filecoin. More are moving to what's called Arweave, which is actually a permanent storage, meaning you actually pay in advance for long-term storage on a blockchain. But the most secure and the highest value projects in a sense of permanence are actually on-chain, meaning on the Ethereum network, saved like the Punks are. Which means that this image you see is actually an SVG that's the actual data that originates it is saved in the Ethereum blockchain permanently. And that means that asset, not only the ownership of it, the transaction record proving ownership, but the asset itself, the imagery is 100% secure forever, as long as Ethereum runs. So that's just to give you a sense. You'll see that in a lot of projects. Sometimes the on-chain projects will say no IPFS, no junk here. It's 100% on-chain, and that's because it is kind of a calling card of the more advanced use of Ethereum. Then there are derivatives, and this is just an example. Somebody took the all of the data's on the blockchain, right? So they took the data of the traits and the graphic representation of those traits of the Cryptopunks, and they made crypto baby punks. And they generated 999, random, just like the way the punks did, and created this other community. And they have a very strong Discord, very strong following. Many of the OG punks are owners, and the developers are overlapping with other top projects. So these are kind of like, they literally are the baby punks, like kind of like a second tier of the punk universe. One member of the community built a thing called Punks Family, where you can see the family tree, the origins, so you can see who the parents are of the baby punks and whether they have any siblings and so on. And you see that a lot, is that the communities just start building, and again, painting. There's kind of like a tendency that when something gets large enough, there's always some homage painting. Then you see other kinds of derivatives like this one. Artifact is a studio that is kind of moving NFTs into fashion or high-end collectibles. And as their launch project, they created what they called the Punks Project, which was kind of like a gesture to the punks community, because these 10,000 punks are owned by people who are relatively sophisticated collectors often. And so what they did was they gave them a gift. So they launched by saying, if you own a punk, you can just connect your wallet to this website and you'll be able to generate a new collectible. In fact, not just a digital collectible, but something that you can have offline as well. So this is how that website worked. And what it did was took the color palette of the punk and generated a shoe design. And that shoe is a collectible, a digital collectible, but it's also able to be what they call forged. So you could order your shoes in whatever size you want, and you'd get a one-of-a-kind shoe made from your punk. So kind of an odd thing to do in some ways, but considering that sneakers are collectibles and that NFTs are collectibles, it turned out to be a good idea. And many punks took up that offer. They were able to do it for free. And you see that a lot, where a new community will give a present to the owners of another community in order to bring them in to kind of create a market for whatever they're doing. So this is just one good example of that. And then what happens is that those become tradable as well. So you see that those auto-generated shoes and kind of 3D faces from the punks that Artifact made are actually collectibles being traded in their own collection now. And that means that essentially what they gave each owner of the punk was now, as a minimum, worth about $10,000. Like, just, here you go. And you see that a lot, and it's kind of a strange phenomenon that you don't see anywhere else. But in this world, communities giving value to other members of communities is quite common. And they have a roadmap that shows the punk owners that they're going to keep making things for them, and that these things will come and keep creating value, which keeps them to be loyal to their other projects. And Artifact happens to do very high-end projects. So they made these one-of-a-kind Cybertruck shoes for Elon Musk, and then they made a Snapchat filter so you could try them on yourself. And they auctioned off those shoes ended up selling for $105,000. So think of that as kind of a high-end fashion art project. That's the kind of stuff they're doing. And now they're launching more projects from that base. And if they hadn't given that gesture to the punk community, for example, they probably wouldn't have had that start. This is their new avatar or kind of PFP project that is full body 3D NFTs that are usable in any 3D world. So a little futuristic project coming out of them now. So that kind of covers a little deep dive into the punks and some related projects, and that establishes our profile photo kind of graphic side of things. Any questions, comments there? How are we doing on time? Oh my God, we don't have enough time. All right, I'm going to speed up. I know it seems like we're going fast, but I'm going to speed up. And what we're going to do afterwards is share this. So if you want to look into any of these in more depth, you can. What we're going to look at now is the art side of things, but still from a graphic perspective. You might have heard about Beeple. Beeple really made history with the launch of this project, which was 5,000 days of small little artworks. And each day he was releasing them publicly on social media, but then collected them all up and auctioned them for millions and millions of dollars. That doesn't happen all the time, but it's just a great example of what is happening, though, is that people with some kind of talent or interest do end up finding their way into this space and creating value in a way that they never could before. So that one's there. A similar project in terms of history is Justin Aversano. He also had worked for about 2 years on these photos, and they're beautiful photos. They're unique photos, studies of twins. He had lost his twin at birth and felt like he wanted to study twins. So they did these photographs, and at some point someone said, "Hey, why don't you make some NFTs?" So yeah, okay, why not? And he put them on OpenSea, and people loved them. And now they're one of the highest value pieces of art in the NFT space. And what I want to point out here is that creators get to set not only the price that they sell initially, but also the royalties. So this is, if you go to buy anything on OpenSea, you'll see this little royalties thing here. And it says the creator of this collection will receive 10% of the sale total from future sales of this item. And that's important. What that means is that there's no middleman. It's actually in the smart contract that wherever these things are sold, the artist is going to receive, in this case, 10%. Sometimes it's 5%, sometimes it's 2.5%, but they receive recurring revenue forever based on the assets they create, which was never possible before. And it's super easy. People can just add them like you'd upload, images on an, Airbnb profile or something. They give it a few details, they set their price, and they set their royalty rate. and off they go. There are more sophisticated ways of doing it, but it is very, very accessible and more or less free. So here's Claire Silver, similar story, kind of struggling artist, doing great work, but not getting noticed, started creating NFTs. And now one of hers was bought by Cosimo Medici, which happens to be the anonymous identity of no longer anonymous Snoop Dogg. So there's some kind of collector value in this. Okay, well, what a great story. I just closed on the house for my mom, 90% paid for my own art via NFTs. Grew up poor, been a dream since I was a little kid. There's stories like that everywhere. And that's definitely one of the sides of the art side of this that's really exciting, is how it empowers people to sell directly. This is Xcopy doing work that really can only be done in digital space. They're kind of crazy. You wouldn't want that, on all the time in your home maybe. But in this space, they're super valuable and interesting just because they're so distinct. So true art emerging from this space. And then the last example is generative art. And I just chose this because Fidenza is probably one of the most recognized, but it's actually a platform that it's called Art Blocks, and it's really collecting generative artists, meaning mathematicians and developers, programmers who work with algorithms that create art. And that art is often unpredictable, but within some ranges. And they're becoming really incredible works to explore and collect. And these are the Fidenzas. And this is the one that kind of people call God mode, like it's the ultimate of what this algorithm could do. But like any art, it's in your own personal taste and whether you think it's worth the $8.5 million that Snoop Dogg paid for it. So that's the world of art and on the graphical side. And I'm just going to go even faster through this next section because it's mind-blowing, kind of hard to grasp, but you have to see it. Someone said, yeah, okay, NFTs, great, but do they have to be all this art? Do we really need to draw stuff? And Dom Hoffman, who is the inventor of Vine, if you remember the short format video platform bought by Twitter, he created this and he said, actually, no, they don't have to be art. They just have to be descriptions. So these black boxes with a description of things that a character might have, a sword or gloves, that these are the NFT. And then based on that, people could create things. And that concept of a minimalist NFT really blew people away. All the media started writing about it, and loot became this kind of new way of thinking about NFTs as more derivative opportunities. And a ton of projects, there's probably 100 projects built on top of the loot platform. One I wanted to highlight is called Treasure, where they created a system that could decompose your traits and actually associate them with images so you could create characters. And then they realized that actually there's a bigger opportunity, and they created something called Magic, which is a token, kind of like Ethereum, but it's a token that now they've created a world behind. And I don't have time to show you this whole video, but it's basically trying to create a currency behind all NFTs and games and other things, and being a bridge between the metaverses. And that currency is volatile, but it's taking hold and starting to be interesting. They also created a marketplace that only trades in Magic, the currency, and there's all kinds of things going on in that world. And it all came from this idea of loot. Then someone came along and said, wait a second, it doesn't have to be character traits like loot. It could just be numbers. So N Project also, huge press coverage. What is this thing? This is crazy. And it really is kind of crazy. And what's crazy about it is that all it is numbers. It's a set of 8 numbers that then you own. And then you can use those 8 numbers. But more importantly, a huge community of people are building things for those 8 numbers. I'll show you in a second, but just to give you a sense for, they treat it like if you hold these numbers, you're part of a network of collectors. You're going to be able to kind of reach this audience. And it just means that there are all these people out there holding these numbers. And you're like, what does that mean? Well, what can you do with that? Back to the generative art, what you can do with that is create unique works of art off of each number. So one of the early projects was this one, where depending on what N you had, it would generate a unique piece of work, work of art for you. And anyone holding an N could do that for free or for very little, for $100, $200, and then others would build on that and be able to maybe sell them for more money or do other derivative works. So these are just examples of artworks created by those Ns. This DNA one has a whole set of projects spinning off of it as well. And you can see just how many there are. It's pretty wild. So it's just to give you a sense of what is an NFT. An NFT is not what you think it is. It's not a work of art. It's not a profile photo. It can be all kinds of concepts. And this one is particularly powerful. And it also spun a DAO out of it, meaning some of the holders of N said, hey, can't we create a better way of finding great artists who want to build on top of N? And so what they did was they actually started a new decentralized marketplace that is based on N, the NFT I just showed you, but really builds aggressively on top of it. And what that means is that they launch artists on top of this platform now. These three are launched. This one's coming soon. And you can see that the price here, 0.04 ETH, is actually a very low kind of collector's price for an initial artwork. So they're launching it to the end community and then going kind of public from there. And what they do is they issue you a new NFT. So you join nil, and you put in your N, and it changes into this one. And this is called a staked N, meaning you're now part of that community. And then you earn money and voting power by staking that N. So this is where it gets into more of a financial model, where the value of an N is actually being held, and in that way kind of like a savings rate. And they're actually paying a very high interest rate to incentivize others to create liquidity in this network. And it's growing. And as it grows, it becomes a better and better platform to launch artists from. And their token is tradable just like Ethereum or other currencies. And in that way, becomes this whole new ecosystem. So that's, to me, that kind of thing is mind-blowing. And what's most interesting about it too is it's a true DAO, meaning when they want to change something, when they want to launch, let's say, a bond program or some other thing behind the scenes, it's all done democratically. They propose it, it's open for discussion, then it goes to a vote. And if you have a wallet holding the staked N, then you can vote on the DAO's proposals and be a part of this democratic community. So then we get into a couple of the art projects really fast that they're launching. This one's super cool. It's called Seed Phrase. It's going to be 0.08 for the public, 0.04 for these N holders that I mentioned, so owners of the DAO. Cool thing about it is it's based on words that generate these images, and the words are from the seed phrases used in a wallet, a crypto wallet. And what they've done is they've said, if you get one of these works of art that has one word that can match another word, meaning a word like meat space would be combined into a phrase that means something, then you're going to be able to take that one and burn it together with another one to create a super rare version. So it's kind of a strange concept, but you're using some qualifier, some words combined in order to make it possible for the owner of these pieces of art to create a new work of art that no one else could have made. So that's the kind of thing that's going on in these projects now, where the participation of the community in the creation of the art is really next level. Just quickly, something similar. This one's launching on N as well. It's just to show you what can an NFT be. This artist has been very active in the NIL DAO community, sharing works and getting feedback and building this thing. And it's going to launch soon, and people are pretty excited about it because it really is a very different kind of NFT where all of those actions are generated by an algorithm. The color palettes, the range is all kind of like that Fidenza I showed earlier, generated by an algorithm. And then the last work on this side of things is called Bato, or the last project is called Bato. And it's interesting because it's an AI that is an artist. And the job of the community is to help that artist learn how to create great art. And the way it works is similar to with nil-DAO. You have to have the token BOTO, which you can buy on an open market. You can swap it. You stake the BOTO, and that earns you voting points. So you've now invested in the project, therefore you get to vote. What do you vote on? You vote on training the artist. So what it does is it proposes 2 fragments, they call them, and you judge between the fragments, and you go through and you vote on these fragments in a way that fits your liking. And since there's thousands of people doing this, what happens is it learns from us all, and it gradually creates better and better works of art. And you can like it or not. Some of it I don't like much, but it's now created 7 of them. And kind of like the Nouns project, these are automatically auctioned by the smart contract, spits them out once a week, auctions them on super rare, and then takes the money from the auction and burns the BOTO token in order to decrease the supply of the token and raise its price. So the community benefits, the better they teach the algorithm, the more this art sells for. And you can see they're selling for significant amounts of money, $80,000, $116,000. And you can see the bidding gets pretty aggressive. And so what's happening is that the more this works, every week, new one comes out, the more people vote, the better they get, the more the community, gets known, and the token goes up in value. So really special mechanic that I haven't seen anywhere else. And Anne-Sophie's coming in and saying, we're out of time. Well, I think what I'll do is, we could leave the suspense, what was going to be in this, this corner. I'll just jump to the end. What I had included down there are a bunch of projects that kind of look a little bit like PFPs, but they have all kinds of things going on in them that are very different. Burn mechanics, tokenomics, extreme compression. I'll just mention these last 2, Furballs. This is 100% on-chain, but looks like the graphic quality. It's a hacked SVG that the development team created that is compressing on a level that Ethereum never could. And this last one, SUP, is the next project from Dom Hoffman I mentioned earlier. And that is full on, I'm just going to show you. That is full on games. This is the firmware playing on Ethereum. And this is the first game cartridge. And these will be NFTs that you can buy and have like the early Atari or Pong or these early games. And that's really where we're at. And what I wanted to leave with is that where we're at is figuring out bandwidth, figuring out capability of what Ethereum can do, and then reinventing everything we know about the web today.
Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, it's been fascinating, inspiring, and I think it's complicated, right? I thought, well, now I'll know everything about NFT and it will be super easy for me to comprehend, but I don't think it is. But thank you so much, because I think you try to make it understandable, and I love the guide to get started. So maybe we should actually start investing in some of these Cryptopunks or crypto baby punks or whatever we've been introduced to today. Personally, I've learned a lot of new words. I'm trying to get a hold of it. I mean, smart contract artists, the full transparency and the democratic community around it is super interesting, I think. The honest tax base in the future. So it's a new era we're going into, and we should definitely put our brains in it and get an understanding. I also love your DYOR, do your own research. I mean, I think it's super interesting because it's a market which is new, so we have to be very, very careful not to get into stuff we shouldn't get into. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
And as Michael said, you will receive the presentation, and all the slides you didn't have time to go through, we will be able to look into, and I'm sure Michael will be happy to answer any questions or whatever you want if you want to take contact to him. We want to wish you a Merry Christmas, and this is the last inspirational talk this year, the second one in our journey of inspirational talks. The next one will be January the 12th at 9 o'clock with Professor Dr. Purnima Luthra. from Copenhagen Business School, and she's going to talk about inclusive leadership through active allyship. So I hope we'll see you there. And Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and take care of yourself out there.
Thank you. You too.
Ciao, Michael. Ciao, everyone.